Section 1. A Nation Divided, Slavery and Sectionalism. The United States in the early 19th century was a nation of contrasts, marked by a stark division between North and South. This division was not just geographical, but also deeply rooted in differing economic systems and social structures. At the heart of this division lay the institution of slavery, a practice that had been present since the early colonial days, but had become a defining characteristic of Southern life. In the South, slavery was deeply entrenched, forming the backbone of its agricultural economy. The vast plantations relied heavily on slave labor to produce cash crops like cotton, tobacco and sugar. Southern society viewed slavery as essential to its way of life and resisted any attempts to restrict or abolish it. The social and political elite of the South were particularly vocal in defending the institution. The North, on the other hand, had largely transitioned to an industrial economy. Factories, railroads, and urban centers were becoming the hallmarks of Northern progress. Slavery had gradually declined and was widely viewed as morally reprehensible. Many Northern states had passed laws to abolish slavery, and free African Americans were becoming more visible in society. Abolitionist sentiment grew stronger, with many Northerners actively campaigning for slavery's end. Figures like Frederick Douglass and Harriet Beecher Stowe became prominent voices in the movement. This fundamental difference in values and economic systems created a chasm between the two regions. The North and South were becoming increasingly alienated from each other. Adding fuel to the fire was the issue of westward expansion. As settlers moved westward, the question of whether new territories would be free or slave states became a contentious issue. As the United States acquired vast new territories, the question of whether slavery should be allowed to expand into these areas became a major point of contention. This debate often played out in Congress with heated arguments and political maneuvering. The South, eager to protect its interests, fought for the expansion of slavery. Southern leaders argued that their economic survival depended on the ability to spread slavery into new territories. The North, driven by moral and economic concerns, opposed it fiercely. Northern politicians and activists saw the expansion of slavery as a threat to free labor and a moral blight on the nation. This struggle over the expansion of slavery further exacerbated tensions and set the stage for a showdown. The debates became more intense and compromises became harder to reach. The debate over slavery permeated all aspects of American life, infiltrating politics, religion, and social discourse. It was a topic that could not be ignored and was discussed in homes, churches, and public forums. It was a time of growing sectionalism, with each side becoming increasingly entrenched in its own beliefs and suspicious of the other. The sense of unity that had once held the nation together was fraying. The stage was set for a crisis that would test the very fabric of the nation. The unresolved issues of slavery and sectionalism would soon lead to a conflict that would change the United States forever. Section 2. The Compromise of 1850. A Temporary Truce. By 1850, the issue of slavery had pushed the nation to the brink of disunion. The North and South were deeply divided, with each side holding firm to their beliefs and way of life. The Compromise of 1850, a series of bills passed by Congress, sought to address the most pressing issues dividing North and South and avert the immediate threat of secession. It was a complex package of measures designed to balance the interests of both regions. A key provision of the compromise was the admission of California as a free state. This was a significant development, as California's entry into the Union as a free state would alter the balance of power. This was a major victory for the North, as it tilted the balance of power in the Senate in their favor. The North now had more representation, which was crucial in the ongoing debate over slavery. To appease the South, the compromise included a stronger Fugitive Slave Act. This act was designed to ensure that runaway slaves would be returned to their owners, even if they had escaped to free states. This law made it easier for slave owners to recapture runaway slaves and imposed harsh penalties on those who aided their escape. It was a deeply controversial measure that angered many in the North and galvanized the abolitionist movement. The compromise also addressed the question of slavery in the newly acquired territories of Utah and New Mexico. These territories were part of the land gained from the Mexican-American War and their status was hotly debated. Instead of imposing a solution, Congress opted for popular sovereignty, allowing residents of these territories to decide for themselves whether or not to allow slavery. This approach was seen as a way to let the people directly affected make the decision. While intended as a compromise, this provision only served to reignite tensions later on. The question of whether new states would be free or slave states continued to be a source of conflict. The Compromise of 1850 was hailed by some as a victory for moderation and a testament to the power of compromise. Henry Clay, known as the Great Compromiser, played a key role in its passage. However, it proved to be only a temporary truce. The measures taken were not enough to resolve the deep-seated issues. The fundamental issues dividing North and South remained unresolved, simmering beneath the surface and threatening to erupt once more. The Compromise of 1850 was a stopgap, delaying but not preventing the inevitable conflict that would come to a head in the Civil War. Section 3. The Kansas-Nebraska Act, fanning the flames of discord. In 1854, the fragile peace established by the Compromise of 1850 was shattered by the Kansas-Nebraska Act. This controversial legislation, championed by Senator Stephen Douglas of Illinois, aimed to organize the territories of Kansas and Nebraska for potential statehood. However, it did so by effectively repealing the Missouri Compromise of 1820, which had prohibited slavery north of the 36 degrees 30 minutes parallel. The act stipulated that the question of slavery in Kansas and Nebraska would be decided by popular sovereignty, allowing residents to vote on whether or not to allow it. This reignited the debate over slavery expansion with a vengeance. Both sides poured into the territories, determined to sway the vote in their favor. The result was chaos. Kansas became a battleground with pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions engaging in widespread violence and fraud. The territory earned the nickname Bleeding Kansas, a grim testament to the passions ignited by the slavery issue. The violence in Kansas shocked the nation and served as a stark reminder of the deep divisions that threatened to tear the country apart. Section 4. The Dred Scott Decision, fueling the fire. The Dred Scott decision of 1857 further inflamed tensions and pushed the nation closer to the brink of civil war. Dred Scott, a slave who had resided in free territory for several years, sued for his freedom, arguing that his residence in a free state made him a free man. The case reached the Supreme Court, which issued a ruling that sent shockwaves through the nation and had far-reaching implications. In a 7-2 decision, the court ruled against Scott, denying his claim to freedom and reinforcing the institution of slavery. Chief Justice Roger Taney, writing for the majority, argued that African Americans, whether free or enslaved, were not considered citizens and therefore had no standing to sue in federal court. This ruling was a stark reminder of the systemic racism entrenched in the legal system. The court went further, declaring that Congress had no power to prohibit slavery in the territories, effectively invalidating the Missouri Compromise, which had maintained a fragile balance between free and slave states. The Dred Scott decision was a major victory for the South and a devastating blow to the anti-slavery movement, emboldening pro-slavery advocates. It effectively declared that slavery was legal in all territories, opening the door for its expansion throughout the West and threatening to spread the institution even further. The decision outraged many Northerners who viewed it as a blatant attempt by the South to impose its will on the entire nation, undermining the principles of freedom and equality. It further radicalized the abolitionist movement, galvanizing activists to intensify their efforts and deepened the divide between North and South, setting the stage for the impending conflict. Section 5. The Rise of the Republican Party, a new political force. The tumultuous events of the 1850s led to the emergence of a new political force. The Republican Party, founded in 1854 by anti-slavery activists, the Republican Party quickly gained traction, uniting a diverse coalition of former Whigs, Free Soilers, and anti-slavery Democrats. The Republican Party was united by its opposition to the expansion of slavery. While not advocating for immediate abolition, Republicans believed that slavery should be confined to the states where it already existed. They argued that slavery was a moral evil and a threat to the principles of free labor upon which the nation was founded. The Republican Party's platform resonated with a growing number of Northerners who were alarmed by the South's aggressive defense of slavery and its attempts to expand its reach. The party's rise signaled a major shift in the political landscape, challenging the dominance of the Democratic Party, which had long been divided over the issue of slavery. Section 6, the Lincoln-Douglas debates, a battle for the soul of America. The 1858 Illinois Senate race between Abraham Lincoln, a little-known Republican lawyer, and Stephen Douglas, the incumbent Democrat and a national figure, captivated the nation. The two men engaged in a series of 7 debates, focusing primarily on the issue of slavery. Lincoln, though less experienced than Douglas, proved to be a formidable debater. He argued passionately against the expansion of slavery, famously declaring that a house divided against itself cannot stand. Douglas, a staunch advocate of popular sovereignty, attempted to defend his record while appealing to both pro-slavery and anti-slavery factions. The Lincoln-Douglas debates were more than just a political contest. They were a battle for the soul of America. They exposed the deep divisions within the nation and forced Americans to confront the issue of slavery head-on. The debates propelled Lincoln into the national spotlight and laid the groundwork for his eventual presidency.